Hey, pay attention, everybody. Tucker Carlson, Buck Sexton, Amy Vaughn, and myself, Dutch Mendenhall, are hosting an event. Have you ever felt like the wealthiest in America play by a different rulebook? Even if you earn well, make money, invest wisely, educate yourself, there is an invisible barrier. It separates you from the financial security enjoyed by America's elite. The economic landscape changes every day. The wealthy elite know how to stay ahead of it because we play by a different rulebook. At InvestWell Summit, we'll share all the plays, and we're making it to win. Spots are going to sell out fast at InvestWell Summit, so get your butt to InvestWellSummit.com and secure your seat now.
It was a weekend full of lots and lots of jokes. Let's start with the worst one first up. Hardly a plain loose sailing day, wasn't it, for Max Verstappen? Right?
Do the jokes get better or do they get worse from this? Is what I'm trying to get at. It's the anticipation, like, oh my God, 3 stops in a race. How much more entertaining will it be? And guess what? It wasn't. So, Samuel, do the jokes get better or do they get
another
worse?
one?
Why don't we go to the next one?
Okay, right. This joke failed. It's okay. Sometimes the first joke of the evening doesn't quite go well. Let's go to the second one. Why don't we talk about tires? That in itself was a joke, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, tires have always been a joke.
You can admit it. I think the silence speaks a lot.
I think tires have always been a joke in this Pirelli era of Formula One. But yesterday was a non-Pirelli-ish race that we just witnessed.
Okay, that's joke number 2. Sundaram, I'm coming to you for joke number 3. What is the bigger one? Aston Martin or the people at Aston Martin?
Bigger what?
Bigger joke?
Oh,
I mean, I know there's a lot of
It's
pushing and
difficult.
shoving going on in your mind, as it did in the garage as well.
yes, it definitely is. It definitely is. Lots of things could be better in my opinion, but I'm not going to start off today's episode by going and complaining about certain factors or certain aspects of the team. So let's have a better start
Okay.
to
For
this
joke
episode.
number 4, track limits, Kunal.
My goodness.
Jokes don't end.
I'll tell you what, Pierre Gasly and Checo Perez on track limits. That's a bigger joke, I would say, from yesterday's race because
Yeah.
they're like, oh, keep giving me time penalties, no problem. I'll accumulate penalties instead of points. And but I have to. Okay, there's
One sec.
more.
The jokes
There you
aren't
go.
over. This is just joke number 4.
Wow.
Joke number 5, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked about tires, right? Let's also talk about racing because clearly, folks, the drivers can't do any. Like, we've seen so many clashes of them going side by side and hitting each other and going off in the gravel. Clearly, we've got 5 big jokes in the weekend. What are we starting off with, Kunal?
Why don't we start off by asking all of us and probably also the poll that I'll put out on Spotify. How exciting was the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix? Did all those number of pit stops make any difference to our racing experience? Why don't we go with you first, Mr. F1 Stats Guru?
Firstly, Kunal, it's not Qatar or it's not Qatar, the way Crofty kept mentioning it time and again during the broadcast. And that's my one gripe with him, but it's Qatar. Okay, so that thing's out
Ladies
of the way.
and gentlemen, that
But-
comes from a person who's actually lived in the Middle East. I would probably go with Sundaram's. I will retrain my mind to say Qatar and not Qatar. And I definitely
Sounds
can't
better
do it the way
also.
Crofty does.
It sounds better also.
Okay, so now what was the question again? I've
How
forgotten it.
entertaining was the Qatar Grand Prix, despite or with all those mandatory pit stops and stint lengths that were regulated?
So I think the whole weekend was pretty exciting considering there were so many things happening. We also had the sprint. There was a lot of action happening during even sprint qualifying, the normal qualifying. And I think even the race was very enjoyable to a certain extent. Yes, I mean, if you're diving into the whole pit stops and stint lengths discussion, I think that kind of robbed us away from the unpredictability and also the fact that F1 was repeatedly broadcasting that on screen that, okay, Verstappen has to pit by lap 52 or 54.
Yeah.
I think, beyond a point, I think it's just too much information. Otherwise, they're just following a template. So And I think this just then leads to the next question. Do we like mandatory pit stops or mandatory stint lengths? I think, like I said, it's just too much information. I would really be of the opinion that, sure, we use three different compounds. I would like to see three different compounds being used mandatorily. And surely the FIA or Formula One will have to do a lot of, arrangement here and there just to ensure that everyone has sufficient tires and everything. But I am really not for the fact that pit stops have to be predefined or stint lengths have to be predefined. But generally, generally speaking, and I also got my bold prediction right, Somil, this time. I had mentioned that Verstappen is not going to be topping every single session. So we had Verstappen taking pole for the race, and he won the race. Piastri got pole in the sprint, and he also won the sprint. So my prediction's been pretty right.
Yeah, you nailed it. And Kunal, also your take as well about Piastri having driven at Qatar previously and having that experience. I don't know how much of it counted, but it did eventually get him a win. But we're now starting off talking about the jokes. So let's finish the jokes and then let's get to the good stuff.
So the question is now to you, Somil. How exciting was the race for you with the three stops? I think Sundaram has given a brilliant answer. Do you want to top up to that, or do you just want to say ditto? Or, like a lot of Formula One drivers say in the press conferences, same as him, same as what he said.
I think when they're so dead tired after all the heat exhaustion, I think they can't speak more than 3 words anyway. So I pity them on that. But when we're talking about this, right, I think it's a lot like, have you guys seen those old Russian communist buildings that they used to have in the past, where they used to have town blocks and they all ended up looking the same? And have you ever seen documents where an art designer is trying to express the vibe, but it's all in Times New Roman, and you feel like, eh? It feels so bland and predictable. And that's not what Formula One is meant to be all about, right? It's meant to have color, some sort of unpredictability, which, at least looking on Twitter after my flight, I thought it would be, because I ended up missing the race, unfortunately, in the moment. And only I got online with 7 laps to go. And I look at the chaos, all the crashes, safety car, George Russell hitting Lewis Hamilton, Verstappen and all the drivers complaining of heat exhaustion. I thought it was a good race until I watched it this morning. I mean, I'm honestly slightly annoyed, but isn't it brilliant, Kunal, that at least we get a race? Otherwise, this Qatar GP in itself would have been a part of the Inside Line stand-up club, because we used to have the Indy 2005 join that list. It is, in fact, front and center is the biggest joke that Formula One has ever cracked. But this one luckily avoided that. So at least we got a race in the first place.
Oh, yeah. And hats off to the FIA and to Pirelli for, acting on all the data they got from Friday in a proactive manner, right? They were preventive in crashes. Safety came first, no damages. They said we have to do a certain number of stint lengths. Doesn't matter whatever number of pit stops. Yes, there was a lot of data overload, but it was a different way of looking at the sport, because usually we never look at stint lengths. And my only takeaway, which is a little different from Sundaram's, is we actually saw a race that was sprint laps separated by pit stops. So the pace of the race was high. Even though Max Verstappen won, he won in the most non-Max Verstappen way, I would say, because he wasn't, 30 seconds ahead of the rest. He wasn't managing his tires. We heard Lando Norris say, guys, I think I can use my tires more in the second stint, right? So in a way, it was great, because the Pirelli era is all about get onto a tire, extend your life as much as you can. So you have to pit the least number of times and then just manage your tires, manage your stint. Here, somebody else was managing the stint. Somebody was saying, that's it, you've done 18 laps. There you go. Either you're out of the race or you're coming into the pits. And it created a lot of chaos that was impossible to decode in real time while the race was happening. Yep. But eventually, we saw the drivers push. I believe a certain part of the drivers being so exhausted after the race was also linked to the higher race pace that they had to follow. And, if we look into the data, and we were actually doing this data, guys, the 2021 Qatar Grand Prix, the race time was 1 hour, 24 minutes and 28 seconds. There was one VSC. I haven't seen how long that VSC was, but there was no safety car at that time. The average race speed was 217.8 kilometers per hour. The 2023 Qatar Grand Prix, the race time was 1 hour and 27 minutes. So it wasn't actually a faster race. But yes, we had a safety car for over 4 laps. So one assumes that the race was a little faster in eventuality, right? And the average pace compared to 2021 was 211 kilometers per hour. So I think it is to do with the faster pace. There was little time, there was a lot of chaos, and of course, the humidity. I mean, the race in 21 happened end of November. This has happened early October. 6 weeks, and the humidity was 2x or 3x, I'm being told.
Yeah. All over the world generally as well. MotoGP in India, we had Jorge Martin, one of the finest athletes in the world, faint because of heat exhaustion. Exhaustion, sorry. Logan Sargent also having that same issue. But in this whole scenario, Sundaram, are we seeing Formula One drivers being pushed to their absolute limit? Are we going a little bit too far in this whole thing, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think where F1 kind of made a mistake, I think I would term it that way, because I think the scheduling of the Qatar race wasn't right. And I'm glad that next year's Qatar race is actually closer. I think it's on the 1st of December, so it's going to be a lot cooler. I actually checked the charts of humidity and temperature over the last few years. So in that sense, next year's Qatar race would be more suited. And I think that's why I have a feeling that, I mean, drivers have always said that the Singapore Grand Prix is always the most challenging or physical Grand Prix. And you can always hear teams putting out social media content on how drivers prepare for the race. And I'm not really sure if drivers were well prepared for this race, or really did they expect that level of humidity. And and it kind of became more evident as the race went on. But yes, drivers are being pushed to the limit, like Kunal mentioned. If you are, and this is what even Piastri mentioned in the post race interviews, he was literally doing 57 qualifying laps. And if that is the case, it's really pushing them up against the limit, and especially if the conditions are not that good. I mean, Fernando Alonso was saying that his seat was burning, and he was literally asking the team if they could drop a bucket of water over him, and they said, "No, we can't do that."
Why is that not actually? Why can't they do that? Genuinely, like, why can't they pour a bucket?
Good question. I've been wondering the same thing. So maybe Kunal can chip in.
What's the story?
Samuel, given your love for F1 history, do you remember in the 60s they actually threw buckets of water? They did. I just assume that the cockpit has so many electronics that you couldn't really just throw a bucket of water. I mean, I don't know, but they still race in a lot of rain, so it can't be that the cockpit is not water resistant. I would have loved for that to happen. Just somebody goes and throws buckets of water, or a bucket of water on Fernando. But you know what Fernando Alonso got in instead of the bucket of water? There were two people standing on either side of the cockpits, right, with air blowers on him. And I was like, you're just blowing hot air on that poor chap.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just, and for what, his stop was 2.3 seconds. So for a whole 2.3 seconds, he got air blown onto his helmet, not even onto his face.
Absolutely fantastic. As if that absolutely helps in making him feel a little cooler. But even Russell did something similar, Sundaram. He was driving without hands. Look, no hands. Obviously, everyone does that. But he was desperately trying to cool his fingers in the middle of the race. And also we saw Yuki Tsunoda open his visor until he realized, oh, I'm in the middle of a desert. Desert has sand. Sand doesn't go into ice. Yikes. Top visor down. That was a bit of a realization for him as well. But craziness actually all the way through.
No, that's a very good point that you mentioned, that sand went into Tsunoda's helmet, because I think I remember reading this somewhere, especially during the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, is that they put in some sort of resin, or they put in some sort of liquid. Yeah, some sort of an adhesive on the sand around the track, so that it doesn't blow on track, or it doesn't blow into the driver's cockpits. I'm not sure if Qatar actually did that. Okay, now I'm forgetting the question. What was it?
No, I think Qatar is one of the more liberal Middle Eastern countries, at least in that regard. At least it wants to portray that.
Even Bahrain is. Even Bahrain is. Yes.
Right. Okay, my joke didn't really go to plan. But let's talk about another joke very, very quickly. Pirelli. Guys, I know we spoke about this a minute ago, about how big an achievement it is for Formula One just to have a race. I know it's a bit of a farce that we had tire limits restricted down to 18 laps. But genuinely, in my head at least, I like that they're being proactive. The teams didn't get any sort of head start whatsoever on the news. They just immediately got told by that press release by Pirelli all the way through. And the incredible part for me is that it wasn't even something visible. Like the level of detail in their scanning, that is something that honestly even I was unaware of, that they would take every single tire and check the insides as well, not just the outside parts. And the scan really detected something that was microscopic. That level of detail for every single tire, Kunal, in my head, is fantastic. So we might bog them down for having tires that didn't quite work out or for them not predicting the problem. But whatever it might be, that is phenomenal stuff from their end.
It was. And, Indy 2005 was on everybody's mind, saying what's going to happen. Will they, change something? They, of course, changed the corner a little bit. They tightened the exit, etc. But we got to remember, at Indianapolis, Michelin just came with the wrong tire, right? They came with a tire that couldn't or didn't or would definitely not have lasted the race distance. In Qatar, and I said Qatar, okay, just for you,
Nice one.
Sundaram, right? In Qatar, Pirelli came with the correct tire. None of the pre-event information that was shared by the local organizers included what the changes to the curbs were. And I remember I was reading some documentation from Mercedes, and they said unspecified updates have been put to the curbs to avoid tire failures in 2023. It just so happened that they put the pyramid curve. So we've gone from sausage curbs to pyramid curves, which is at least vegan sounding, I would say, right? And the funny thing is, the claim was that the pyramid curves came because of MotoGP. But the truth is, as Mr. Voice of MotoGP would know, Samuel, even the pyramid curbs were not approved by MotoGP. I believe that the curbs in Misano eventually were the ones that were approved. But for some reason, somebody in Qatar thought, let's put the pyramid curbs out there. So it was lost in translation. Sometimes, there's the FIA, there's the circuit owners and the teams. And the teams would rely that the FIA has sorted it out. The FIA has been told, yes, we've sorted it out. But between all of them, the circuit thought the only thing we need to sort out is just change the current curbs we had from 21, put the pyramid curbs, and that was a disaster.
Oh. No, but the pyramid curves were there in 21. The difference was that the pyramid curves were on the outside of the sausage curve as an extra deterrent. This time they brought them in and they were the only deterrent. That is why Pirelli couldn't anticipate it all the way through. But yeah, craziness, isn't it, Sundaram?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I also felt that how come there was probably a lack of communication between the circuit and Formula One on the type of curbs that's being used. And also considering that we have a lot of races, a lot of circuits where MotoGP and Formula One both are being held. So why is this a specific thing to Qatar? So a lot of questions that I was wondering around that. But one question that's been floating around, especially before the race, was why is the stint length specific only to 18 laps? Despite of us having three different compounds, isn't it supposed to be lesser for the soft compound? Isn't it supposed to be more for the hard compound? And I see a lot of people asking us this question, and that's down to the fact that the issue that Pirelli identified was down to the construction of the tire in general, and it was the sidewall that was getting affected, which remains the same. So the construction remains the same, the sidewall remains the same, although they are three different compounds, and hence that's why we had a stint length that was uniform for everyone, for all compounds.
And that was interesting to see all the way through, to see Pirelli then being very open with it. In fact, that is something I really, really appreciate, even though it could have gone wrong. And I don't think you can blame them for this one, honestly. It's just miscommunication between the circuit and sort of reaching out there and cursing Pirelli for something like this. I don't think that really solves the problem. But that's all the jokes done. Let's now go to the good stuff. Let's now let's not talk about Saturday, shall we, folks? Because Saturday was such a good race that at the National Racing Championship in India that we're having right here, I managed to convert a few bike racing fans into watching the sprint, and they loved it. And if you all know your hardcore bike racing fans, they will never, ever, ever watch anything that has more than two wheels. But the sprint was just that good. Even though it was chaotic, we saw drivers passing on the outside, drivers making moves on the inside consistently, Hamilton with that brilliant, beautiful dummy on Carlos Sainz at the end, different tire compounds coming in and out of the race as well. And all we saw at the end was a new winner, the crowning of a new, I wouldn't say champion, but the arrival moment of sorts for someone who we know for a fact is going to be dominating in Formula One in the course of the next 6, 8, 10 years. Isn't it fantastic that we have a new winner, but the entire chat is just not about him? Like, we talk about him 18 minutes into the episode, Sundaram.
Exactly. And the fact that although Oscar Piastri has won the sprint as a rookie as well, I think that's a more important fact. The fact is that once the sprint was over, everyone is celebrating Max Verstappen's third world championship. I think he took prime position as well in the area after where the interviews happened as well. So everyone had kind of forgotten Piastri then and there as well. But a really, I think, a brilliant drive by the young guy, and it just kind of makes it even more exciting just because he's a rookie. And considering all the circumstances that he came in, the whole controversy about Alpine and McLaren, and the first set of races, them finishing P15, P17, I'm sure this thought must have crossed his mind. Did I make the wrong decision? And then once the upgrades come in, the thing that I'm really excited about is the fact that he is not phased by the sudden increase
Yeah.
in pace by the team, and he's there or thereabout with Lando Norris, not too far, but still managing to bring the results. That's what I'm really happy about with Piastri's results.
And 2 points on that, Kunal, before we talk about the depths of Piastri's strengths. I think it's beautiful to see his weaknesses also out there, like tire management sometimes and also extending his stint, because then you can track that story as you go along in his career, and that makes you even more involved. Like, hey, has he overcome it? Has he fixed that part? And so that is beautiful to see. But Piastri being totally neutral when he got no, he dropped that grid position. We talk about track limits in a second, and also being totally neutral when he won. It's a lot like Kimi, and it sort of redefines what a rookie really is in the modern era. And it really also makes a point about our last episode, talking about Logan Sargent and Lance Stroll as well, about how even though they've got more experience, they're just not on that same level, which is what makes it even more serious to see that case. When Piastri is doing so well, I know it's partly the car, but taking the challenge up to Lando Norris, that is quite something.
I mean, I don't think it's partly the car, definitely, Sommel, because to be there and thereabouts with Lando Norris is where it's his talent that's bringing the car there. And, a contrast is from what Daniel Ricciardo was unable to do last year. Again, lots of Ricciardo fans. I'm a big fan of his talent and whatever his return to Formula One will be, could be, should be next year. But you also raised a very important point, Samuel, which is the one thing that Oscar himself has said he needs to do better on, which is tire management. And now, should we be able to track his progress when it comes to tire management, extending stints, and so on? And we have to also say that Oscar Piastri picked up the pieces when Lando Norris didn't do it himself on the Friday, then on the Saturday, track limits or whatever you call all of that. Lando Norris should have taken the pole on both days. He actually said this yesterday. I should have been on pole on Friday and then on pole on Saturday. And it's for all of Lando Norris's talent, especially when you're in a non-Red Bull car and you get that one opportunity coming your way, you need to pick it. And now he's dropped 3 of them. Russia 2021, and Qatar Grand Prix sprint, as well as the Grand Prix format. I know I'm being a little harsh. I know Lando Norris is even harsher on himself. He's taken all the blame for lack of performance, etc. But to see Oscar pick up the pieces is also where I say his talent lies. Because at the moment, Oscar is not the quicker McLaren driver, but he still delivered when it mattered the most 2 times in a row.
Now, I want to talk about this in a really interesting light with the Mercedes drivers. But Sundaram, you had something to say, because this might change the topic and go to Mercedes, because I'm very, very curious to know more about the power dynamic. But you had a word on Oscar before we went there.
Yeah, but just extending on Kunal's part, because the fact is that in this sort of domination that we have with Red Bull, I mean, if you consider the hybrid era itself, there have been a handful of races where a team apart from Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull has won. So there are very few chances where you are given the opportunity to take pole or you're given the opportunity to win a race. And when the chances are that few, you really cannot drop the ball. And that's what I really felt happened, especially during sprint qualifying. When you have the opportunity, when you have the pace to put the car on pole and convert that to a race when you cannot afford to drop the ball. And that's kind of why the criticism towards Lando Norris is you never really know when is his next big opportunity to start at the front of the grid or to convert that to a race win. So yeah, that was what I wanted to mention as well.
And actually, interesting we mentioned Lando Norris, because in the moment where McLaren had a choice yesterday, by yesterday I mean on Sunday night, right, about who finishes P2 and P3, they asked Lando Norris to wait and not attack. We've seen this before, Italy 2021 as well. Norris was told, don't attack Ricciardo. The power dynamic in McLaren, I really appreciate it, because there are moments in time when Norris will also call for it and he'll get things in his way. But I like that the drivers listen. I like that it's a cordial relationship between two almost alphas, let's put it that way. We're seeing Piastri get there. I wonder how it'll be managed once he's at that same level of Norris. But at this moment in time, at least, the drivers listen, and their smarter non-monkey brain does the right thing eventually. Whereas at Mercedes, when you compare the whole scenario, both alphas, both at the top of their game, it seems like we've reached that point now, Kunal, where they can't really work together. They'll have a good cordial relationship on the camera. They'll be chatting with each other, really helping and respecting each other as well. But on the track, you notice what's happened earlier on the year in Spain, in Belgium as well, Suzuka, and now this one. So many incidences of them just not aligning themselves on the track. And yes, this time Lewis came out there and very openly and correctly said that it was his fault. But time and again, we're seeing the sparks now flying. Had this been a championship battle, this would have been the headline story all the way through.
That's interesting. I mean, it is still a championship battle, hopefully for P2 between Perez and Hamilton. But frankly, I don't think it's spilled over as much just because it's not a championship battle. So I'm just saying the contrapoint to your Sommel, which just says that your point was spot on, that Mercedes clearly, I think that's what George Russell said, 2 races in a row they've touched, right? Hamilton has had the run on George in the first part of the season. For a large part of the season, George is now, trying to make a comeback. He's had, I think, 3 front row starts in the last 4 races, or 3 front row starts in the last two front row starts in the last 3 races. So he's sort of gotten up there as well. But I get a feeling that turn 1 incident, I was a little disappointed with the number of times George Russell was trying to clear himself on radio, because it just shows, how much in awe of Lewis Hamilton he is himself. He knows Mercedes is also in as much or more awe of Lewis Hamilton. He knew that, oh my goodness, could I have done different? Should I have done different? And so on. And at the end of the day, it was Lewis's fault. He was on the soft. He got a little too greedy. Yes, he had to be greedy if he had to sort of take the lead of the race. And that was his glory moment. But he didn't leave any space for George Russell, or for that matter, he just turned in too early, too quick, was going to make an early apex, took himself out. Thankfully for Mercedes, George Russell could continue, drove a fantastic race. And I know, Sundaram, we were talking of, was there a pre-race agreement between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton that George wouldn't fight Lewis because he was on the soft? Even if there was one, and the drivers and teams discuss all these various scenarios, my view is that George actually wasn't fighting Lewis. He was fighting Max all along, because he had a great start. He was almost alongside Max. And then out of nowhere, Lewis comes to his left, right? And then turns in early. So George literally couldn't have done anything, whether or not there was a pre-race agreement.
And I've actually watched the footage literally 20 times since yesterday, just to try and understand George and Hamilton's and Lewis's part as well. And the fact is that George and Lewis, both of them got very good starts compared to Verstappen. Verstappen was, I think, 2 to 3 tenths slower. And the fact was that Russell was really being blocked by Verstappen, right, being right in front of him. He couldn't move to the right because that's where the circuit was ending, and he was in Verstappen's slipstream, so he was really kind of gaining pace on Verstappen. Now, even if there was a pre-race agreement that Russell shouldn't battle with Hamilton just because he's on a softer compound, it doesn't mean that Russell has to compromise on his own race as well. So there was a half chance of him, although he and Verstappen were on the same compound, there was a half chance of him going past Verstappen, and he really went for the gap. And like Kunal said, and I actually looked at one other fact as well. Russell said he wasn't looking behind. So Russell looked 5 times behind before they entered the braking zone. And the braking zone was where Lewis Hamilton shot past. So up until that point, Russell knew that Lewis is there, but really not as close to me or as in front. And that's why I feel probably Hamilton was more at fault over here. And I really can't fault Russell for anything over here.
Guys, very quickly, let's also have a word about another big story that sort of happened in this weekend. So there's this guy called Max Verstappen. He became a 3-time champion on Saturday. Routine stuff. We all expect this to happen. It's like the moon rising up in the night. Totally normal. But I want to talk about the circumstances in which that happened. Is it, do you guys think it's the most underwhelming way to become a world champion? Because when you consider the high end drama of 21, the madness of Suzuka 22, and then this one, I think the way Verstappen wins the championship sums up the year he's had. And this one was just underwhelming in every single way, in every single point. Like, you wake up on a Monday feeling, hey, we have a new world champion, but you don't get that feeling anymore for some reason, Kunal. It's just, uh, it's okay, it's happened. But I
Yeah, I
want to
mean,
talk about his teammate more than the driver, actually.
yeah, we should talk about his teammate as well. But I get a feeling we knew all along it was coming. And if we knew all the way back
No.
in,
All along since December?
no, I would say since April or May this year,
Not
when he just kept winning.
not March.
And not March, because at that time, for his teammate that we're going to talk about had a bit of resistance in the first 4 races of the season. And then it was like, okay, one more race. And is somebody going to catch him? And one more race. And then, okay, he's racing in the car and he's racing in the sim. And then he's back in the car and he's I love the way Max has sort of created his own dominant era in his own different ways. For him, it's only and only about racing. And I think it was underwhelming because it was literally just a matter of when rather than if. Okay. And the only clean part was there was no Abu Dhabi 2021 controversy. There was no budget cap or lap count or point scoring controversy or whatever confusion we had in Suzuka last year. It was just about Max was supposed to win. Whether it was in Qatar or in Kota, it didn't matter. He's just won at the earliest possible chance in typical Max Verstappen way. And I think the only thing I will specifically remember about this race, more than Max's win, maybe 2 things. His first is Oscar Piastri's rise, which we discussed. And the second is that extreme heat and humidity, which saw every driver on the grid complain. One driver actually pulled out, Sergeant Logan, and I think that doesn't bear too well on him in his rookie season. Because if Piastri can go and be on the podium 2 times in a row, you should the least be able to finish a race. That's how fit
he
you
had
should
some
be.
Prior illnesses, as far as
But
I
that's the
remember.
catch, and this is what we were discussing in Viaplay, and I'm not going to name anybody else, but through the whole week and as the weekend came, there was no talk of Logan Sargent is unwell. Okay, it was when he retired from the race and he had to get out of the car. It's like, oh, actually, he's been unwell through the whole week and it just peaked on Sunday. So maybe that's a true story, maybe that's not, but I know that drivers have commercial agreements which just dictate what the messaging is around their lack of performance when it comes, like we are seeing in the case of Checo Perez. But Esteban Ocon, he puked in his helmet, lap 15. Alexander Albon had to go to the medical center, and there's so many people were just passing out or just losing focus while in the car. So in a way, it was actually unsafe. I'm just glad we got through this without any problems.
Sundaram, trivia question. When was the last time a Formula 1 driver puked in his helmet?
Mark Webber.
Hey, nice. You're getting there.
2007
is it-
Suzuka.
Fuji. But yeah.
Fuji, yes.
Was it
yes.
Fuji?
No,
But
but
it was Fuji, yeah.
no.
Okay.
7 and 8 were Fuji.
I have a lot
and
of-
then from 9 we went to Suzuka again.
Goodness me, I'll never remember
Yes.
these things.
No, coming back to the Logan Sargent point, because the moment he got back into the pits, Crofty actually had James Vowles on the radio, and he asked this point to him straight away: was Logan unwell throughout the weekend, or was it just something that's happened during the race? So he straight away denied that he was unwell. I mean, he basically said that he was well up until the race started, and it's a resultant of the heat and humidity during the race. So I wouldn't suppose he was unwell if the team principal is admitting to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just PR stuff, it seems like. No, but hopefully, in all honesty, hopefully he is doing better. But now that we're talking about Logan Sargent for a second, guys, very, very quickly before we get to the world champion properly, Lance Stroll. I know we've bashed him and beaten him enough, but come on, man. Shoving your personal trainer, and I know apologizing is one thing. He had no choice but to apologize. But still.
Did he apologize? I didn't even
He
read
did,
an
he did.
apology. Okay.
Yeah, apparently he did. Privately, he apologized, which basically must have meant that accept it or else you lose your job, most likely. But at the end of all of this, like this is all tantrums. Honestly, what is he frustrated about, Kunal? Like I'm trying to answer that question. What is he frustrated about? He's
About nothing going his way, no podiums, despite Fernando Alonso doing everything right in the car, etc., etc. By the way, sorry, the one driver who actually didn't feel the heat or the humidity as much as the younger ones was Mr. Fernando Alonso. And I wonder if his Dakar rally preparations and all of that and him being 42 played a part in that. Oh, this is standard stuff. I've raced in the deserts. This is a circuit next to a desert or whatever. Anyway, but Lance Stroll, do we really gotta have to talk about him? Will he be there in 24?
We have to. It's
Why?
honestly atrocious
Just-
behavior, isn't it? Like just
It is. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But you ask, why is he upset? What's he upset about? Clearly, everything, including, why he is still even in Formula One. Is he there because his dad wants him to be there? Is he there because he wants to be there? Because clearly it's his worst season ever. And there's nothing to really hide about. And Fernando Alonso's exposed him big time. Actually, Lance has exposed himself big time. Forget any other driver.
Yeah, 100%. And Sundaram, this also doesn't bode well for someone like Sergio Perez, who's in a similar circumstance. Not in terms of the behavior, but in terms of the performance. It's What do we have to say about that?
Now, before we come back to go to Perez, Kunal, you mentioned that Lance Stroll's having his worst season. He's actually 10th in the standings, which is actually his best ever position. Yeah, he's finished 11th in 2020 and he's 10th currently. But the fact is that he's had just 47 points. He's not scored in the last 5 races, which is still lesser than his best from 2020, which was 75. So best season, not best season. Yeah, it's somewhere in between. But at least
he
based
is
on
the highest placed driver to have not scored a podium.
Scored a
Pierre
podium.
Gasly
Yes.
and Ocon, who are 11th and 12th, and just 2 points separate the two of them, actually have a podium each. And guess who's 13th? Alexander Albon. But anyway, that's for another, because Albon got 2 points in the sprint as well. There's so much to talk about from this weekend, including all the jokes and the serious stuff that was there.
Yeah, no, but
Can we just jump to Alex Albon quickly right now?
go ahead.
No, because he started the sprint, I think, from 17th. And I think one of the major concerns with the new sprint format was that a lot of the lower end teams, how would they end up scoring points in the sprint if it's just 100 kilometers and there are no pit stops? It basically, there were a lot of talks about it just being a test session for all of them. And James Vowles mentioned this yesterday as well. Sure, we might not have a regular chance of scoring points, but nevertheless, if there is a little bit of chaos or there is a little bit of action or battles happening up in front and someone loses out, sometime we might be in the right place at the right position. So he managed to get, how many points did he get in the sprint? They got 2 points.
Nice.
They got 2 points. In
2
the sprint.
points, and very crucial, Alfa Romeo scored 6 points. So they have jumped Haas. And the gap between
Yes.
Williams and Alfa Romeo is down to 7 points. So that's how crucial every single point is, because every position in the Constructors' Championship eventually means how much money they'll get paid, and so on and so forth from FOM. But we cannot forget that there was a world record pit stop made in the heat and humidity of Qatar. McLaren on Lando Norris's car had a 1.80 second pit stop. The previous world record was 1.82, but that was with the smaller wheels. This is with the 18-inch wheels that we have. Also, usually we've seen heat and humidity means the pit equipment works slower, but here they were on target. And with the new directives they had last year, we had a 2/10 wait before you plug in and plug out a wheel and a wheel nut and whatever everything that they've done to slow down a pit stop. McLaren has said we will still go quicker, and it's 1.8. The other second fastest was Red Bull in Hungary with Checo with a 1.98, right? So 2/10 actually slower now that you look back at it. But they had a world record pit stop, and I think that's great. Speaks volumes that McLaren has been progressing on track and in the pit lane. because both of them are different sets of progressions you make within the budget cap, and that the team is trained enough, synchronized enough to deliver to the tool. So it's not just the drivers, but also the mechanics.
Do you remember?
No, this is a very interesting.
Sorry, you were saying?
Now, I said this is a very interesting point, Kunal, because if you remember last year at the end of the 2022 season, we discussed this very point when I identified that McLaren's pit stops were a lot quicker than in the previous years. So it's not something that's just turned up one fine day. The team have actually been working towards this for the last 2 years, and you can see that with each passing weekend. So if McLaren are having if McLaren has the world record right now, it's clearly a lot of effort, practice, a review of everything of all the procedures that they've been doing, and it's, I think, a well planned way of getting better in your pit stops. And a lot of teams, for example Mercedes, have been a lot more scratchy in the pit stops. I would say there was a time when they were doing 2.3 2.5 second pit stops. This year I think their average is roughly 3 to 3.1 seconds. So Mercedes have in fact become slower in the pits.
And do you guys remember all the old McLaren memes that used to come about 2017-18 about them dropping the car in a pit stop and being absolutely terrible? No. Times have really changed badly. But guys, we need to now end the episode. We are going pretty long. We are just like the Singapore GP, but better in that regard. But we need to end with one thing. One word on Verstappen winning the title. I'll begin. I'll say neutral. What's your word, Sundaram?
I am blank. Probably just as blank as Verstappen. Okay.
Still, if you had to pick one,
I don't
what about you, Kunal?
I don't know.
Okay, I can give Sundaram some time. I think consistency. That's the one word.
No. What's the one word that comes to your mind? Like, what do you feel? Not what do you think?
I feel consistency. Absolutely. I kept saying, and I've said it all the time, I would love to be like Max Verstappen. Wake up every day, win everything that I participate in, do every single day, dominate like nobody else ever has, and annihilate the opposition. That's consistency. I stick by that. I mean, that's the one word that I feel that, oh my goodness, can somebody be so consistent for so long across different tracks, conditions, rivals, rules? And, Checo Perez, we've seen he's demolished Perez just by being so quick and consistent.
So if you...
I'm actually going to go for two words rather than one, because I would say he was inch perfect. I think he and someone else did not exceed track limits during yesterday's race. I can't remember who the other
Hamilton
was.
I think, but I'm not sure.
He did it, but only once.
Yeah, but Verstappen did not exceed track limits yesterday, and Perez was really having a difficult time during qualifying, trying to understand where track limits actually were. And the fact is that Verstappen has not had the cushion that many a times people compare this era with the Hamilton-Bottas era and everything. Verstappen's not really had the cushion with Sergio Perez racing somewhere in P8, P10, P12. Just in case if he makes a mistake, just in case he goes off track, he really doesn't have Perez kind of backing up or the team being able to make strategy work. So that's why he's had to be that much more perfect in all aspects, quali and in the race. So if I have to describe Verstappen's campaign, I would say just inch perfect.
Not his campaign. What do you feel at the end? That's the sentiment.
What do I feel?
Maybe blank is the word. Because it's all so expected. Yeah. But that's beautiful, isn't it? The fact that greatness is all expected from Max Verstappen. I think that is an achievement in itself, joining so many other great drivers. Prost, Schumacher, Vettel, Nelson Piquet. Nobody would not. No, I think he's the only champion who would like to join Nelson Piquet, in all honesty. But no, what a illustrious club to be a part of. And what a weekend we've had all the way through, with chaos all the way in the end. The race might not have been interesting, but all the stories surrounding it, I think that makes up for why we have such a long episode, because there are so many stories to talk about. But let's hope that the next time we're back on the Inside Line F1 podcast, it is going to be even more fun. Folks, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the Inside Line F1 podcast, and we'll be back soon with more fun episodes. See you then. Bye-bye. And maintain track limits. Don't go off track, please.